Let's bring in Tim Constantine, who's a writer for the Washington Times and the host of the Capitol Hill Show. And we'll talk about President Trump's social media post. Tim, welcome. That expletive-laden social media post threatening power plant day and bridge day if Iran doesn't reopen the Strait. Are those appropriate words for a U.S. president?
Absolutely not. Swearing, the expletives, clearly beneath the office of the President of the United States.
So why do it?
Donald Trump's been doing it for years and years, maybe not always in Truth Social, but he says things, he swears, he is brash, he is loud, he is Donald Trump.
All right, so is that calculated pressure by Donald Trump? Does he think that's what he's doing, or impulsive? Who was it aimed at? Tehran or a domestic audience?
I think maybe a little of both. And I think Tehran, it's an interesting dichotomy here where one day or even 1 hour, Trump will talk in terms of he hopes diplomacy is successful, and he lays out some thoughts about what objectives may or may not have been met and what he hopes Iran will do. In this case, we have until Tuesday morning, and he hopes that things will be solved. But an hour later, he will say, oh, by the way, if you don't, it's going to be all hell. We're going to blow everything up. And in here, he talks about it's going to be power plant day and bridge day. And so I think that Donald Trump believes that is adding pressure. I don't think that he fully comprehends that that probably makes the Iranians, it does make them stiffen up and stiffen their back rather than more likely to capitulate.
So we had that expletive-laden social media post, and yet just hours later, he's telling Fox News that a deal with Iran could be done by Monday, and that Iran is negotiating. What do you make of that?
Well, and I'm not sure what to believe here, because we will hear from certain factions within Iran. We'll hear some of these on the record, some of these off the record, that they're open to speak. Yes, well, we are. If Pakistan is willing to work, we didn't say that we declined, and yet there are some conditions that are put on their list that essentially are declining to speak. And so we get very mixed messages. We get mixed messages out of Donald Trump, but we get very mixed messages out of Iran as well. So you're never quite sure. I tend to think the State Department and the President of the United States are speaking with someone. The question, of course, is who is it, and does that person have the authority to actually make decisions on behalf of Iran? I don't know.
And as far as Donald Trump is concerned and what he thinks he's doing, is it a deliberate good cop, bad cop strategy, or a sign that there's no strategy at all?
No, I think there is a strategy here, and it's interesting. That's a great question, because early on, some of the accusations against Trump were that first, that he had nobody knew what the objectives of the war were. And I thought, I don't know how you missed that, because literally the hour that the first strike happened, he released an 8-minute video that laid out the 3 objectives they were trying to achieve. And then as time went on, the week 1, week 2, they said, I don't think he has any military plan here, but you watched as strategically and militarily. I understand there's political issues and there's the Strait of Hormuz and other things, but militarily, they were very methodical in how they took the Iranian military machine apart piece by piece by piece, and very effective in how they did that. So that didn't happen without some planning and without some careful
Except as they've shown, they can still shoot down a
They can. I thought it was an interesting comment the Ministry of Foreign Affairs representative said there when he said, well, for 36 days, they said we had no defense, but we showed them on day 36. And I'm thinking, if it took you 36 days to have one success, that is not something I would be bragging about.
Getting back to President Trump and his objectives, he talked today in his social media post, and he's said it before, about taking Iran's oil if there's no deal. What does that say about what the actual U.S. objectives are?
Sure. That's obviously not one of the objectives, but I do think that would be punishing. If you look normally, and don't hold me to this first number, but normally the amount of oil leaving the Strait of Hormuz is about 24 or 28, I don't remember which percent, from Iran. They have about a quarter of all the oil that comes through there is from them. Currently, it's about 96%. So what that's really about is economic punishment during this time of conflict. It's not about, we're going to come take your oil in perpetuity. It's about, this is your only economic lifeline right now, and we may cut that off. I think that's what he's trying to say.
All right. Iran, though, as you'd expect, has rejected threats like those. It's dismissed the idea of direct talks, too. Does the president's rhetoric strengthen Iran's position rather than weaken it?
No, not at all. Because if you look, the Gulf countries all lined up behind UN resolution that condemned what they're doing in Hormuz and elsewhere. There is no one, with the possible exception of Russia, they're resupplying apparently drones to Iran. But there's no one on planet Earth that is saying, hey, we're on Iran's team here. They're not only neutral, these countries are lining up and saying, what you're doing isn't okay. And I mean, we keep seeing it day after day. And I understand the argument about what the United States is doing and if they're hitting citizen or infrastructure. I get all that. But the complaint coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Iran about that is from a country who on day one hit a luxury hotel as their first target, and then throughout the last 36 days have hit oil refineries and have hit citizen areas. And so their complaints ring hollow. And the one thing they've done continually is they said, yes, we're willing to negotiate, even before the initial strike. We're willing to negotiate. But each time they came to the table, they would say, we don't want to talk about ballistic missiles. We don't want to talk about the proxy groups. And what we'd really like is to protect our sovereignty, and we're going to continue to enrich uranium to whatever level we want, and we'll continue to stockpile it. But we're happy to talk to you. That's literally zero in the way of compromise. So is Trump brash? Absolutely. But has Iran shown any inclination to compromise even a tiny bit? No, they haven't. And if they would, I think this thing would, that little sliver would move it along.
Tim, we could talk for a lot longer. We're out of time. But many thanks, Steve. Tim,
Thank you.
Constantine.